Hey, this is Mark A. Altman, and if you're a fan of this podcast, you already know the 50-year mission is definitive oral history of Star Trek, and Secrets of the Force will tell you everything you want to know about the history of Star Wars. But what you probably don't know is Ed Gross and I have a new book coming out this July. They Shouldn't Have Killed His Dog, the complete, uncensored, ass-kicking oral history of John Wick, Gun Fu, and the new age of action. Coming from St. Martin's in hardcover, digital, and audio. You can order it today.
Welcome back to the 430 Movie. We got our expert programmers here to curate fantasy theme weeks of classic films.
From 1998, film directed by Steven Soderbergh called Out of Sight.
Yes.
Soderbergh directs it with such a sort of confident, self-assured style.
Lex Luthor in Superman.
What is it about Gene Hackman that...
His performance, it's off the charts, but still in reality. Fiendishly gifted.
1981 Sam Raimi opus, The Evil Dead.
Oh, yes. Right? Fine choice.
Sam Raimi invented entirely new ways to get shots that should not have been possible with the amount of money that he did not have.
Charade.
Yeah. Oh, so
directed
good.
by Stanley Donen. It's a textbook screenplay. It's just effortless, and there's not a wrong note in this movie. Can't say enough great things about it. We'll be back next Friday with an all-new episode of the 430 Movie, wherever you listen to podcasts.
Join us now for the 430 Movie.
The 430 Movie Podcast is available weekly wherever you listen to podcasts and on the free Electric Now app. Download it today.
Hello and welcome to Best Movies Never Made, the podcast where we talk about interesting and infamous movies that never made it to or through production. Most of the time, the movies you're trying to make don't get made.
Like 4 of them may happen, 1 of them may happen, none of them may happen, and I'll be attached to 3 more things by end of summer.
Turn the script into something resembling like Unforgiven with Conan.
Yeah.
Sadly, the rights expired and the whole thing just like went away overnight.
New episodes will be available every other Monday. We won't see you at the movies.
Best Movies Never Made, as featured in Entertainment Weekly, is available wherever you listen to podcasts and on the free Electric Now app. Hey, this is Mark A. Altman.
And this is Darren Doctorman. And we are the inglorious
Treksperts. And we got some great guests here today. We got Trekspert Ashley Miller returning from the Dragon's Blood set, where he has just finished the 2nd season of the hit Netflix show. There is no set, but it sounds
if there
good.
Were, it would be amazing.
Yeah, right. Exactly. And we're glad to have Ashley back. And of course, a returning champion, always a delight to have him on the show. It's Voyager and Enterprise writer-producer, as well as the co-creator of, oh my God, I just lost my train of thought. Perception. Yes. The co-creator of Perception for TNT, the great MICHAEL SUSSMAN, is back. And speaking of Michael, I was remiss when I mentioned all the great people that we saw at the Star Trek The Motion Picture Director's Edition screening. Of course, Michael was there. And what do you think of that? Of the Director's Edition?
I've never seen it look or sound better. Although I have to say, I was sitting for half the movie. I was sitting next to somebody who was eating popcorn. If you remember, they gave out popcorn.
I do remember.
And I was sitting next to somebody who was eating it very like slowly and deliberately, but like noisily. And, I'm trying to enjoy all the new sound effects and everything. And, the crinkle of the bag. And then after a half hour, this person finally puts the popcorn bag down. And I'm like, oh, thank goodness. And they pick up another one that they had under the sheet and started resuming.
And you're like, absolutely, I will not interfere.
That's when I ran into you outside the screen.
That's when you ran into me.
I left and then found a new seat after that.
Oh, yeah, that's right. I remember that.
And I ended up sitting, I think, 4th row from the front, which at first I was like, oh, this can't be a great seat. But that's a fantastic theater. And every seat's a pretty good seat. Mm-hmm. And I came right back in as it was the Enterprise was going through the Voyager cloud. And I swear to God, it was like watching it in 3D. It was amazing. I really felt like I had never seen the film before.
Well, the popcorn adventure was just beginning.
Exactly.
And great candy too, which is interesting because at AMC,
no expense.
At AMC, I can't find a bunch of crunch anymore. I guess because of the supply chain issues. They don't have a bunch of crunch. But Paramount, they had a bunch of crunch.
They've been hoarding it.
I was very sad though that the Enterprise herself did not make an appearance at this screening, like she did at the previous one in 2001.
Well, she's under new management now.
Yes, somebody should have called Bezos.
Yeah, I'm sure he would have just sent her right down. But that was great. Yeah, that was right 20 years ago when we were at that Robert Wise Directors Guild screening. They had the Enterprise right on the. It was like a Peter Greenaway film. You had all the food and the
Shatner, Nimoy, and the Enterprise,
and the Enterprise on the buffet.
That's right.
Yeah, that was pretty. That was pretty some awesome stuff. But that was a great night. It was a great night for all of us, and great night for Daren Dochterman and the team behind Star Trek: The Motion Picture Director's Edition. So congratulations. I have to say, I'm very excited. I don't know if you guys know, but next month is one of my absolute, I'm so excited. It's a prequel to all these characters that I absolutely loved. There's a lot of excitement about it. People are talking about it. And I cannot wait for Obi-Wan Kenobi. Oh. Have you seen the footage? It looks great. Darth Vader's back, that clown Anakin, that Anakin guy. But it looks like it's going to be really good and dark. And the Inquisitors from Star Wars Rebels. I can't wait. It looks like they're really going to nail the prequel thing.
It does. Although, I saw somebody had posted a screenshot of somebody's freaking tweet. I don't know, but it was an excellent point. It was about how the Star Wars universe, to a certain extent, has sort of so wrapped around itself that in Star Wars, right, Han Solo shows up on the Death Star, and both of Darth Vader's children are there. His former teacher is there. The Wookiee who spared the life of his Padawan is there. His former astromech is there, and the droid he built as a child is there. And that it ends with the character who in the prequels was the greatest pilot. I guess he was the Dennis Quaid of
Maverick
yeah, exactly. That he just sort of shows up and basically the space equivalent of an 18-wheeler and shoots him in the ass. And Darth Vader just not wondering who this Han Solo is.
There's certain eddies and currents in the Force that bring everybody together.
That's right.
Uh-huh.
So Eddie
Current was one of the great Jedi.
I'm looking forward to it. I just hope it isn't the Book of Obi-Wan.
I don't think so. I think, they've been talking about this for a long time, and it seems like some really interesting people are involved. And look, I'm always hopeful.
It looks great.
I'm always hopeful.
Yeah, so I have a new hopeful.
I have a new hopeful. And, look, it's no secret. I'm not a fan of prequels or the prequels. But Star Wars is very good at sort of following canon. And I can't wait. I hope it's great. It might not be.
It evolve.
Much like Voyager.
That's right. And at the end of the first season, Obi-Wan Kenobi becomes an android. It's so weird. It's oh wait, no, I'm mixing things up. I'm sorry, guys. I got confused.
Well, anyway, I'm sure there won't be any scenes set in the parking lot. Okay, so anyway, look, a couple of weeks ago, we were trying to find an excuse to not call a mailbag episode, or the mail sack episode, as Daren was lobbying for. So we came up with this idea. We just started talking about Star Trek's greatest seasons, and it got a lot of play on the interwebs. A lot of people wanted to weigh in with their thoughts, and we thought, you know what, we must return to this place again with a little more prepared, better guests, and so here we are again to really resolve this question once and for all of what is Star Trek's greatest season. And we got some great people representing all the great seasons of Star Trek, representing Star Trek, the original series. I feel like I don't even want to say the original series. I just want to call it Star Trek.
Just call it Star Trek.
It's kind of like calling Star Wars Star Wars.
I don't call it A New Hope. I never have.
I hate people who do.
I call it Star Wars.
Trek A New Hope.
So Star Trek Season 2. That's what I call it. Star Trek Season 2. Darren's going to advocate for that. Here to represent Deep Space Nine Season 5, Ashley Edward Miller.
Although I'm calling an audible here because my review of the problem space, it's so tough for me. But I think I'm actually going to make the case instead for Season 6. And I think when you hear my reasons, you'll go, oh, okay, that's
wait. So wait, we're putting 5 on the bench. We're putting out 6?
5 on the bench, and we're bringing out 6 because there are a couple of very just undeniable things in that.
Okay, so we're going to make the swap. Swap. Okay. Season 6 it is. I'm not exactly prepared for that, but I don't need to be because you're the one who's advocating for it. What we saw when we had this on Twitter, where people were talking about it, we had the poll, and we had a lot of people talking on Twitter about this. A lot of people were saying, "Where is Enterprise Season 4?" So it was only fair that we bring on Mike Sussman. Now, I just want to say before we say anything about Michael in Season 4, Mike was very resistant to take this on because, of course, unlike other people on this podcast, he's not an egomaniacal narcissist. And so he didn't really want to, it was a show he worked on. He's very proud of. He didn't want to say, okay, this is the greatest season of Star Trek ever. I think partially because he worked on it, partially because he doesn't believe it. But he's going to do it anyway. And we're so grateful to him for coming to talk about why Season 4 of Enterprise should be in the running here.
Well, I will say this. I think it is the greatest season that I worked on. I will say that. I worked on 5 seasons of Star Trek, the last season of Voyager and all 4 of Enterprise. So, no hesitation to say that.
Yeah. But that's an easy one to win. Nobody's going to argue that one. So that's great. And so many great episodes. We'll talk about that in a second. And then last but not least, I'm kind of put in the position of in measure of a man. Remember when Riker had to like say that Data was not human, that he was put in the unenviable task of having to attack his friend and basically go against Picard because there were no other ships in the quadrant or no other lawyers in the courtroom.
There are no space lawyers.
There are no space lawyers around. There's no JAG. There's no, I don't know. Paramount wasn't doing some kind of legal show. There was no Boston Legal. There was nothing. So basically Riker had to go against Picard. So I am going to take the winner of our Twitter poll, The Next Generation Season 3. That was the winner of our Twitter poll. Next Generation seems to get the edge in these polls. And of course, I'm a fan of it. I'm not dismissing it. I was a big advocate for it. People who back in the day would read my articles in Cinefantastic. I championed the season and how Michael Piller, turned the ship around, turned the aircraft carrier around, the oil tanker, so amazingly in Season 3. Of course, it's not the greatest season of Star Trek ever, but I'll make the case. Much like Mike, I will make the case, even if because that's what you have to do as an advocate. Sometimes the person you're representing is guilty as hell, but you gotta make the argument anyway.
You're really selling it, Mark.
So I'm going to make that argument. And I could make it. They're great episodes that season.
Absolutely.
So great episodes. Anyway,
good luck. Good luck to you.
So here we are, and I have to say, I was trying to bring somebody here to represent a season of Voyager, the other Star Trek show that's not represented today, but I couldn't find anybody who really, could really articulate in a passionate way and is, a true Trekspert, a true gamester. See, so I also just really, do we need to talk about Voyager being the greatest season of Star Trek ever? I know that people believe that, but they're wrong. So
I'm sure they're out there, and I'm sure there are people who could convince us, but we just didn't have time to find them.
We didn't have time to find because we don't exactly put a ton of prepping in shows. Yeah. So. Anyway, so I'm going to start with, let's start with Darren and tell us, make your treatise, make your opening statement, if you will, about why the second season of Star Trek is the greatest season of Star Trek ever.
The second season of Star Trek is the greatest season ever because it is the season that builds the house. What I mean by that is that season 1 built the foundation, set the rules. They worked through it for a bunch of like 24 episodes, 26 episodes. And they really set the stage for what became an absolutely intriguing, dynamic, different take on the show. Some of the episodes go off in little odd directions that you wouldn't expect. Some new ideas brought forth, some new adversaries to meet, some new problems to solve. And the main reason why I think it's the best is that it starts out with a huge triple play home run. That doesn't make sense, but what I mean is a bases loaded home run. Bases loaded home run. Thank you. A bases loaded home run with Amok Time.
Captain's log, stardate 3372.7. First Officer Spock seems to be under stress.
If I want anything from you, I'll ask for it. If you don't get him to Vulcan within a week, 8 days at the outside, he'll die.
I await you. Who is she?
My wife.
She chooses the challenge. She will choose thy champion.
This one.
This combat is to the death.
Amok Time is the beginning of the second season, and it is so jam-packed with depth, character, and world building that it really stands the test of time. It's all of Vulcan in one episode, basically, and it's so well done. The strange beginning of it with Spock apparently acting crazy and hyper emotional and basically throwing soup everywhere. I mean, we haven't.
What's a metaphor for something, isn't it?
We haven't seen him like this ever, and it's frightening. We don't know what's going on. McCoy can't figure it out, and Spock won't tell him what it is.
Yeah, nobody likes the soup.
Omik is bad. Let's just face it. It's bad soup. But the great thing about it is that it opens up the world of the Vulcans like never before. This is written by Ted Sturgeon, a world-renowned sci-fi writer. And he takes the Vulcan soul and puts it in a couple of interesting characters that we meet on Spock's home planet in the temple of his ancestors in their place of Kunut Kalifi, the challenge. And it is amazing how much ground is covered in this. Now, remember, this is before we actually knew much of anything about Spock's history. Well, first of all, we learn about their strange 7-year drive to find a mate, and we meet his intended one, T'Pring, who we find out to be a very interesting character indeed. She's got her plan all set, and she's going to get her way, and it's really fascinating. And we meet the great T'Pau, who is a historical leader of the Vulcan people. And, we hear about her later in Enterprise.
And how great. Arlene Martell is so great as T'Pring. Yeah. And then you have just absolutely brilliant as T'Pau.
Celia Losky,
who was in obviously she was a Manchurian Candidate. She's in what's it called, Soylent Green. But so along with Mark Leonard and maybe Jolene, those are the two greatest Vulcan performances.
Yeah. So great, in fact, that she had a band named after her in the 80s.
Well, that's true. That's true. With a little bit of heart and soul.
I mean, Mike, what do you think about all this?
I'm sorry, you're talking to me?
I mean, Amok Time, right? Yeah, I mean,
join the expedition.
The Amok Time is probably, I mean, I go back and forth between City on the Edge of Forever and Amok Time as being like my all-time favorite episodes of, any of the series. So, yeah, I mean, it was, of course, I wasn't there back in, 67, 68, whenever it was that the season premiered. But I can only imagine, the fans who had, waited all summer for the show to come back and were, I'm sure, dying to get to know more about this character of Spock, who had totally broken out. And you had this amazing, Theodore Sturgeon script, just, leading off that season. But if I remember, it wasn't the first one they actually shot. I think they knew what they had in that episode and moved it up in the order.
Yep.
And remember that we hadn't even met Spock's parents yet.
Right. And they're not in this episode either.
They're not in the episode, but it teases their existence with Kirk's throwaway line that Spock never mentioned that his parents were this important, but it's so good, and it's full of surprises and little twists and turns, and it's really a lot of fun.
Yeah. I will say I've heard over the years, I felt like I was a bit of an outlier because I think season 2 was always my favorite. And yet it felt like most people thought it was the first season. And the first season, of course, has some amazing, amazing episodes. And it was the one that kicked the whole thing off. But it's almost like, the difference between Star Wars and Empire,
Absolutely.
So, great analogy.
They created the world and now they can play around it.
I mean, I suppose if Space Seed and City were in season 2, it would be probably,
the perfect season.
It would be the perfect season, but it is pretty damn amazing as it is, for sure. I mean, just looking at the list of episodes in here, it's just classic after classic after classic.
I mean, you can certainly make the case that season 1, is close, if not better. But I think your analogy is very sound because, the first couple episodes, it struggles. I mean, Man Trap isn't a great episode. I mean, I would say Charlie X.
They're still figuring out what the dynamics are.
So, the shore leave. There's obviously Arena. Tomorrow's Yesterday, super fun. There's City on the Edge of Forever, which is as good as Star Trek ever got. Errand of Mercy, which is terrific. But, there are a lot of, okay episodes. I mean, and there's also This Side of Paradise, which is brilliant. But, and Devil in the Dark. So, I mean, yes, there's many, many great episodes. But if you're going to aggregate it, then you have Alternative Factor pulling down the average.
Right.
Right. And I think people tend to give, we kind of look back at those early seasons. And like in my head, for example, it's easy for me to draw a bright line between season 1, 2, and season 3. I'm not even just talking about kind of the sort of the change in command. I'm talking about just aesthetically how different it feels. And so season 1 and 2 feel very much of a piece, like they're almost one season of the show. So I think people tend to conflate a lot of what's in season 2 with season 1, and in their heads create perfect seasons that never quite existed.
Yeah, agreed.
And since we all watched it in syndication, the seasons don't really, it's not like if we'd watched it in its original airings.
They're not delineated enough.
They're not delineated enough. Exactly. Right. And I just think, it just goes from strength to strength. Plus, there's no secret, I'm a huge Gene Coon fan. So I prefer his writing to John D.F. Black and Steve Carbastos. And to me, the show really comes together, and I love a lot of what Roddenberry did, like the Menagerie, obviously, but Gene Coon to me, sort of nailed the alchemy of, social comment, drama and comedy.
Yeah.
Right.
So, I mean, that's why you have, Darren, Mirror, Mirror.
Sure.
Doomsday Machine.
What happened to your crew?
Oh, we were dead.
Mr. Sulu, you will lay in an evasive course back to the Constellation.
Aye, sir. Belay that last order, helmsman. We're going to attack.
You will carry out my last order, Mr. Sulu.
I am assuming command of the Enterprise.
But I would advise against it.
Scotty, get us out of here. Prepare to beam me aboard on my signal. Gentlemen, I suggest you beam me aboard.
Which pound for pound, is, it's if not the top, it's certainly, I mean, City is, but Doomsday Machine belongs in that top three.
It's the best combination of action, sci-fi, and character.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. And a great guest performance. Has all of them.
An absolutely great guest performance that, you could argue that William Wyndham chews the scenery far more efficiently than Shatner ever did.
And then if you're Scott Mance,
you got budget.
Metamorphosis, but Journey to Babel. I mean, another top 10 episode, Tribbles, which has defined Star Trek for a generation of viewers.
And the great thing is that even the lesser successful episodes like Patterns of Force, which is a little on the nose, even those are incredibly entertaining and interesting and fun to watch.
Right. And they endure in little things like the John Gill Memorial Theater.
That's correct, which we haven't seen in 2 years.
I know. Can you believe that? We haven't been in the John Gill Memorial podcasting studio in over 2 years.
Yeah.
What literally Melicon is up to in that theater right now. I mean,
God knows what he's getting away with. I'll tell you.
He's probably pretty lonely.
He's been in lockdown for 2 years.
Yeah, but the thing about Patterns of Force, it's like now, with the Russians and the Ukraine, it's like almost, Patterns of Force again, it like comes back and it's like sort of meaningful. And Scott, our good friend Scott Mance, did Patterns of Force on his podcast recently. And he, I saw it on social, he's saying, well, this is not an episode that's well regarded. I used to love Patterns of Force.
Yeah. He's just wrong.
Now, Mike, you don't like it? I mean, it's a ridiculous premise.
It's great fun. I mean, just to buy for a notion that this legendary historian thought it might be a good idea to recreate Nazi Germany on an alien planet. I mean, that's a big buy. But if you buy it, it's a fun episode.
But they pull that whole, the whole Gestapo trick, which is like something out of Great Escape or something, where they pretend that she's, the hero of the fatherland, Daria. And then, I do really like, there's so much of that episode that I do like, and the point that it's trying to make. And it's interesting because it's saying the more advanced spacefaring civilization that was trying to do right by Akosia, ended up, being victimized by them through their good deed.
Well, I mean, you know what? I promise you that pig will never walk again.
And it has that great line too. I don't care if you have to beat him down here naked.
Right.
Just get him down here. And the guy who played John Gill, I forget his name, but
I think that the great opportunity lost was that the planet from Patterns of Force never fought the planet from Piece of the Action, so that we could see if Rick Blaine was right in Casablanca.
Look, A Piece of the Action to me is a much better episode.
Yeah.
Much better episode. Sure. But I like Patterns of Force.
We are.
Oh, wonderful.
Although I have to point out, not to jump ahead, but the two-parter that season 4 of Enterprise premiered with Stormfront was mobsters versus space Nazis. So Star Trek's done everything basically after 700, 800 shows.
But you see, again, a missed opportunity of actually calling the episodes mobsters versus space Nazis. I mean,
that was my choice.
Anyway, but that's pretty much my pitch for season 2. I mean, It starts out with a bang, and it ends with a really fun episode, The Simon Earth, that could have been a really great spin-off series.
And could still be.
And, well...
As you argued on a previous episode.
It could be a spin-off series or used as a deadly weapon. But
do we have the right?
Yeah. 2 drops of this could cure, but more of it could kill. So anyway, the great thing about the season is that there are so many great and interesting and fun episodes in it. And you can see that the actors are having a great time. And they are really getting to stretch their legs and fill the characters better than any other time in the series.
And this comes off an interesting run because it follows Ultimate Computer, which is terrific.
Captain's log, stardate 4731.3. The M5 Multitronic unit has taken over total control of the Enterprise.
I can't run a starship with 20 crewmen.
The M5 can.
That thing murdered one of my crewmen, and now you tell me you can't turn it off?
Sir, sensors are picking up 4 Federation starships.
Base is firing.
Hit on the Lexington.
We're firing again, sir.
The Excalibur, a direct hit.
The Hood and Potemkin are moving off.
Base is firing, Captain.
Lexington, hit again.
There's your murder charge. Deliberate, calculated. That thing is killing men and women. 4 starships, 1,600 men and women.
It misunderstood.
I believe the only way to stop the Enterprise is to destroy her. Request permission to proceed.
Which is way ahead of its time, talking about how automation will replace humans. And, that's something we continue to wrestle with now with, factory robots. And
we're all Captain Dunsel.
We're all Captain Dunsel. And then, we've talked about on our entirely different podcast, Treksperts Briefing Room, the fun of bread and circuses, which is just, again, it's another Earth-like Hodgkin's law of planetary parallel development, but it's fun. It's fun. Because the character beats are. See, that's the thing. When people look at the styrofoam rocks and, the things, but if the character drama is right, is good, none of that matters. It all disappears because the character stuff is so strong.
And shout out to our friend of the show, Joe D'Augusta, for amazing casting of these supporting roles and these, weekly antagonists. He did an amazing job with just casting these great characters and making them real.
Yeah. You can't say enough good things about Joe D'Augusta. I mean, it's because it's not just the casting of the principal cast, but it's these incredible guest stars.
Yeah.
And Percy Rodriguez and Court Marshall in the first season to Morgan Woodward and in Dagger of the Mind and later in Omega Glory. And Omega Glory, we'll argue that's not, my opinion, it's not a very good episode. You like it, but we all love Morgan Woodward.
It's dumb, but it's fun to watch.
Yeah.
Like my kids.
and then
you cannot forget Barry Russo.
Barry Russo as
2 characters, right?
As Commodore Wesley, and then in Devil in the Dark,
Lieutenant Giotto.
Yeah,
right, in Devil in the Dark, right?
Yeah.
But I will tell you though, Commodore Wesley, that whole Dunsel crack, boy, he had it coming. If I was caught out,
he had it coming. You would have slapped him.
Get
my ship's name out of your mouth.
Too soon.
And how great is Lansing, Robert Lansing in Assignment Earth? Oh my
God, he's perfect. He's absolutely perfect. There's no one around now who could do that.
Yeah, I want to see them bring that whole mythology back in Star Trek.
As great as he is,
right?
Terry Garr.
Oh my God, Terry Garr was perfect.
Terry Garr is unbelievable. She's so good. She's so much fun.
Yeah,
it's so sad to think of what could have been had that show been greenlit. Yeah. So okay, so that's Darren's argument for why Star Trek season 2 is so damn special. And I want to go now to sort of semi chronologically to Mike Sussman, who's going to tell us about why make the case.
It's not chronological at all. But
in every direction, the opposite of chronological.
We're going back in time. The slingshot effect. Who cares what order we're going? I want to go.
I see. No, you're going forward in time from Assignment Earth.
Yeah, fine. Yes, there you go. So
there you go.
Anyway,
because we're going to take the long way back to the future.
Right.
Going back to the future.
One day at a time.
Right. That's you, Mike.
Oh, that's up to me.
Mike, let's tell us about season 4 of Enterprise and why this is a season worthy of inclusion.
Well, I mean, coming off, this discussion about the original show, that was really something that, that really informed season 4. I mean, season 4 was, when we started off the year, we weren't even sure season 4 was going to happen. The show came very close to cancellation at the end of season 3. And, we had a brand new showrunner in Manny Cotto, who had only been writing for the show for I think about maybe a little more than half the third season. And we'd been, when he arrived, we were in the middle of this, season-long arc about the Xindi War. And a lot of those episodes, particularly towards the middle and end, were very heavily serialized. And I think Manny, who is, as you all well know, and you talked to on the show, is a huge original series fan. He was just sort of chomping at the bit to dive into some of that mythology, which our show was, laying the ground for. And so before we'd even gotten the pickup, I sat down with him in his office, and we were just we just started brainstorming, and Manny had already had so many ideas for what he wanted to do, and they were all tied into not only what we had been doing on Enterprise, but leading into the original series, assuming this was going to be our last 22 episodes, which it was. The types of stories he wanted to do. He wanted to go back to Vulcan and revisit their society and see how they became the race and the species that we know from the original series. He wanted to go back to the mirror universe. He had an idea for revisiting Khan's Supermen and following up, or rather setting up that
Khan's women.
Khan's women, exactly. But more than that, it ended up there wasn't a whole lot of discussion about it at the beginning. But season 4 of Enterprise really was. I mean, it was serialized in a way in that it was setting up the Federation, and as much shade as the final episode gets thrown at it, the season did end with the founding of the Federation, and it was great fun as a writer to be writing the first handshake between Andorians and Tellarites and humans, and showing how that all came together, and figuring out what was the Romulan War really about. What was filling in the background to a lot of these details that I, as a fan, had been wondering about for ever since I watched the original show. Why were they fighting the Romulans? What did they care? So yeah, I mean, for me as a writer, it was just it was a dream, once in a lifetime opportunity to just dive into the Star Trek mythology that I loved and sort of reverse engineer it and write some pretty good episodes. I think a lot of those episodes ended up being some of the best of the whole series. We didn't do a lot of, we did a couple of one-offs. And I will say this, I really do think Manny cracked the code for how to do modern Star Trek. And I think it's something, from what I understand, the new series could learn from. We were just coming off season 3, which was, 22 episodes serialized, which was tough. It was really hard to do. And we knew we didn't want to do that again because we had just done it, but we also felt like we couldn't go back to a standalone episode every week for 22 more episodes. So we broke the season into little Star Trek movies, 2 or 3 part movies. And if we had an idea that only sustained one episode, fine, we'd put that in there. We did a bunch of them. We'd break it up. And even though in season 4, our budget was cut because we were now able to build a big set like the Vulcan High Command, but we were going to see it in 3 episodes. So now instead of being something modest that it would have been had we built it for a single episode, it could be gargantuan. Even though we have a fraction of the budget that we would have had in previous seasons. And that enabled us to like rebuild, most of the original series sets for our Mirror Universe episode. And so it was just kind of ironic. We got the budget cut, but the season just feels bigger and grander, and in many ways is.
Yeah. That's one of the things that people don't realize about your season, that 4th season of Enterprise. They don't realize these shows were not huge budgets. I mean, when Next Generation started, it was like $1.5 million an episode. So, Enterprise, you moved to high def, which saved a little bit of money over shooting on film, but these were not expensive shows for UPN. UPN wasn't spending a lot of money. They weren't, Paramount wasn't deficiting a lot of money, particularly because they knew that this was going to be the last season. So it was really brilliant to create these little troika of episodes where they would have more scope and feel bigger and more epic. And you could, take the money you had and sort of marshal that to do, a much bigger story on Vulcan, or a bigger story dealing with the, Phantom Romulan ship, or, do the Augment story over 3 episodes. I mean, that's all.
And that was all Manny's idea. And he was inspired, by the way, by Voyager, where Brannon and, his writers had done a lot of, really great 2-parters, which would, I guess, sometimes air. I think they did an episode called Dark Frontier, which I think aired as a movie in the middle of the season. And like me, Manny loved those and wanted to see more of that epic storytelling.
Yeah, and you did some really nice things, and so I'm not saying this because you're on the show, but like I love the introduction of the Columbia in Home at the beginning of the season, because there's a sense that we're one big happy fleet, that there's more than just the Enterprise, and the fact that Scott has this relationship with the captain of the Columbia, like that's interesting. I actually would have liked to have seen more of that. I'm not a huge fan, to be honest, of Brent playing other characters. Like, I think he's brilliant as Data. But he's a character actor that they treat like he's Peter Sellers, which he's not. But he's okay as Dr. Soong. I know they thought this was a very promotable thing that they were doing, to have him playing, another Soong in it, but it works. And it's an interesting story that you tell over those 3 episodes.
I only got to write the last episode in the Soong arc, which I'm trying to remember the titles here. It was The Augments, I think.
UPN Friday. Murdering hostages is turning into a new hobby for you. A biological terror strike that may destroy an entire planet.
What you're proposing is mass murder.
And fuel generations of hatred.
The Klingons will keep Starfleet busy for years.
Surrender, or we'll destroy your ship.
The bomb! Brent Spiner returns in the stunning conclusion of a Star Trek event.
It was Borderland, Cold Station 12, and The Augments, and Brent was in all 3. And what I wanted to establish in the last one, it just didn't fit into the story, was that he was a clone, that all of the songs are clones. It's not just that they all freaking look alike, which is kind of ridiculous.
And they all act like rejects from the Borscht Belt and the Catskills.
Yeah. Plus, it also made sense in that he's a geneticist. Of course, he would clone himself. But I never got to tie that in. And obviously, he's, appeared as other Soongs on, some of the later shows. I don't know that they have established that. I hope they do, because otherwise it doesn't quite make any sense. But look, I love
many Soongs.
I love Brent. It was amazing to go to. I worked one of those episodes. I think it was The Augments. It was directed by LeVar, who I didn't, I watched Next Gen. I was a fan. Sure. I didn't know him. He's directing my episode. And Brent was in it, who I also didn't know, and I was just totally geeking out on during the production of that. It was such a great year for me. I do not pretend to have any objectivity when it comes.
No, and it's great season. Because we all got into this business for the same reason. So when you meet these actors that you loved on Next Generation, like LeVar and Brent, it's exciting. I mean, I know that certainly Ashley can speak to that. Yeah. When doing Dragon's Blood, I mean, it's like a potpourri of like your favorite actors coming in to do voice work.
Oh, it's totally the best, man. It's like, look, there's Tony Todd and there's Michael Dorn. And look, I have, freaking John Delancey and he's in a scene with Anson Mount. And that's so weird. And it's just, and Jeff Combs, my God. And it's just so much fun. We have, such tremendous affection for these people and getting to write for them and put words in their mouth and hear them say things. It's a joy. So I totally get it, man.
No, it's so funny because I was just over the weekend going through old photos from some shows that I've done in the past. And, I came across, I totally forgot about it on Agent X, we had Gerald McRaney as a regular. And so we cast Fred Dreyer in it. And so we wrote all these great scenes for Fred Dreyer and Gerald McRaney together. So it was like Hunter and Simon, and it was as close as I ever got to working on one of those old 70s, 80s shows. And I remember the magic of seeing the two of them in scenes together. And it's funny because we all talk about this. And I did the same thing, casting Aaron Gray and Pandora, just because we could, right? And the funny thing is, it's not just because we're geeks. You hear Nicholas Meyer talk about he wanted Chris Plummer in Star Trek VI because he was a huge fan of his recording of Hamlet. And he said, well, if I cast him in my Star Trek movie, I can have him do Star Trek whenever I want. It was like, pull the string. And obviously he did, because all he does in that movie is recite Shakespeare. But it's not just us. It's just this magical thing.
There's a danger in that, though. I found when casting Star Trek actors in other projects, we ended up casting LeVar on Perception. He had a recurring role as the dean of the school, and I had a script. We had a table read for a script, and I had dropped in. There was a plot point about a license plate, and I wrote the episode. So the license plate began with NCC, and of course LeVar is across the room, and he starts pointing at me and calling me out my Star Trek nerddom.
Yeah, no, it's funny because I remember our good friend Steve Krazier talks about when he was on VIP how. Mark Hamill guest starred, and his one thing that he said was no Star Wars references. He did not want. This is a point in his career where he did not want to hear about Star Wars. It was dead, to him.
And did Steve say you must do what you feel is right?
No, but what was funny was, I guess, without, it's not in the script. Steve took all the Star Wars references out per Mark Hamill, and the last scene, Pam Anderson comes out. For the scene, because Mark Hamill's playing a Canadian Mountie, and I guess he's giving a medal or something for having Pam help or whatever. And it's the medal ceremony, and she comes out with the donuts, her hair done out like Princess Leia done. And Mark apparently hit the roof and locked himself in his trailer. And they were all saying, "Steve, you got to get him out." And Steve's like, "I can't control Pam. She does what she wants." And finally, he came out. But so you're right, there are dangers to being too big a fan.
But it's so worth it.
but so worth it. So then, I love what you did with the Vulcans. Even though there's some questionable performances, the Troika, set on Vulcan with the Vulcan Reformation that's going on. That's a fun 3-part, particularly the first one, The Forge.
Yeah, that was a great one that Judy and Gar had written. And it's just kind of shocking to me that they had not been called in earlier because they had TV credits, and obviously they'd written, several well-regarded Star Trek novels and I think some source books as well. It's so funny to me because at that point I spent years, pitching and occasionally selling stories to Voyager, and I pitched to Deep Space Nine, and I'd pitch a story to Deep Space Nine, not sell it, and then walk across the hall and then sell it to Voyager. So I was just so.
Did you change the names? Same
yeah,
pitch?
Exactly. Yeah. Bashir became the holographic doctor. It all worked. It all worked. That actually happened. But I was so steeped in the lore. Had I not been a writer, I might have lost touch with Star Trek a bit in the mid 90s. But so Judy and Gar come on our show on Enterprise, and I realized I blew them away in terms of you talk about being a Trekspert. I was correcting them on minutia, which was just like I couldn't do it now. It's all gone out of my head for the most part. But it's kind of crazy what happens to your brain when you've been just immersed.
We got to get Mike an honorary Treksperts certificate.
Well, if you could go back and give it to me 20 years ago, I don't know. We're time traveling.
We can do the whole thing in a parking lot.
But yeah, no, I mean, revisiting the Vulcans, because I think in an earlier episode of Enterprise, we did I think all the UPN shows were tasked with doing a show that was kind of an allegory for AIDS and HIV. And the exec producers wrote an episode about mind melding spreading a disease, but it was really cool. But the episode established something weird that didn't fit, at least for me, with the rest of Star Trek canon, which was that only certain Vulcans could mind meld.
Yeah, that's not right.
I was like, well, that was never a thing. There was never like anybody, hey, are you a melder? Are you a melder? There were obviously
be a melder too.
Vulcans who, yeah, exactly. I'm sure there were Vulcans who didn't do it, but so anyway, in that arc, we had T'Pol, who had this disease, this uncurable disease that had been caused by mind melding, and one of the big revelations that came out in that 3-parter was that, it was actually all a big conspiracy. It was all a lie. We can all meld, and I can teach you. T'Pau told T'Pol. So, little adjustments like that, but that wasn't the drive behind doing those. It was just to tell great stories set in that universe. And if they could lay down that groundwork of, the founding of the Federation. I wish we'd gotten 7 seasons. That would have been great. I think we could have stretched some of that out, but
great for your mortgage too.
Yeah, exactly.
Well, I'm just wondering why LeVar didn't play the Forge.
Well, and you've talked, obviously Darren had Mirror in his season. You've talked at length on the show in the past about In Mirror Darkly.
UPN Friday on an all-new Star Trek Enterprise. The universe has an evil twin.
I'll shoot you myself.
I'll kill you when I get out of this.
Break him. Will you kindly die?
A parallel universe.
Where anything can happen, and probably will. With an exciting encounter in the world of classic Star Trek. The final 5 episodes.
So I don't want to belabor that point, but of course, there's that great Mirror 2-parter that you guys did that season. And then I think there's that really interesting Demons Terra Prime 2-parter, which, sort of deals with xenophobia in a classic Star Trek way.
UPN Friday.
Just beyond the next planet, just beyond the next star.
2 hours, 2 episodes, one incredible goodbye.
Been a hell of a run. I never thought it would come to an end.
As distant future generations look back. A brig is bigger than this.
A lot of things change in 200 years.
On her last heroic missions.
How many died?
71.
Her journey ends where the Federation begins.
Here's to the next generation.
Star Trek Enterprise.
No, for sure. I mean, I had, it's funny because I watched those episodes. I was so busy doing both parts of the Mirror Universe shows. I was just burned out. And there were only 3 episodes left in the season, in the series. Rick and Brand had written the last one. And Manny and Judy and Gar wrote Demons and Terra Prime, which was initially going to be a 3-parter. I mean, there was enough story there for a 3-parter. And as good as it is, it feels a little rushed actually. Yeah. And, at the time, I think before anyone had actually even read the final script, we were hoping that we could actually turn it into a 3-part. I think ultimately the cast would have been happier with that, and probably some of our viewers. But there was just so much to do. There was so much story left to tell, and I wish we'd gotten a chance to tell more. But what a packed season! I wouldn't put the quality up with TOS season 2 by any means, but it is just very dense, I think. And
you can't say that. That would have been like during our Star Trek 6 debate, Steve Asbell saying, "Well, Darren, you're right. It's not that great. I guess you're right." But that was.
Oh, and by the way, I'm here to defend Star Trek 3. So go.
Oh, just defend Star Trek 3. Oh my! That's a whole nother conversation.
That's
really? Did you listen to
at least 3 minutes?
Did you listen to our well thought out and incredibly well reasoned 2-part episode about why Star Trek 3 is not a good movie?
I did. Yeah, I agreed with everything you said. I still have a soft spot for it.
That's how we feel, though. But then that's how we feel. Yeah. We spent 2 hours, talking about why it doesn't work, but we all still like it anyway.
So. I think one of the big reasons for me is the soundtrack. It's probably a controversial opinion, but I think it's James Horner's best score between Trek 2 and 3.
Oh, I don't think that's controversial at all. I think it's a much better score than Star Trek 2.
Yeah.
Yeah. I mean, Star Trek 2 is a wonderful score, but Star Trek 3 is just, it's a better score.
Yeah.
I mean, when I was a kid and I had the LPs, I listened to Star Trek 3 a lot more than I listened to Star Trek 2.
Well, of course it is, because it has more Tchaikovsky in it.
With 100% point. But no, it has the Stealing the Enterprise cue, which is gorgeous, and just has a lot more. Because, the problem with the LP for Star Trek 2 is it always had, like, Khan's Pets, which is very atonal, which I had no interest. Like, there was a bunch of stuff that wasn't that great on the soundtrack album. With Star Trek 3, other than the disco, but that was a separate. I think that was a second disc. Was the disco track?
Yes.
But
one side of the second
Skin of Evil.
Yeah, that was like pound for pound, just a better soundtrack album, much more listenable.
Yeah. I mean, Battle of Mutar Nebula is like unsurpassed, but like Star Trek 3 is like, for me, wall to wall that.
Yeah, and Kirk's explosive reply is great. So anyway, okay.
I'm glad you said reply.
We're now in a totally different episode of
Come on, Jesus. Are we 12-year-olds on this show?
Yes. Yes, we are.
Apparently so. Okay, so that brings us to Ashley, and I'm not quite sure where we are with this Deep Space Nine. See, you keep changing your mind. What season of Deep Space Nine is the greatest season of Star Trek ever?
I'm going to say that it's season 6, but I'll begin by saying, when we were talking about season 2 of Star Trek, one of the things that we discussed was how there were episodes kind of before and after that you sort of put them all together, you'd end up with a perfect season of television, right? Mm-hmm. And it's like, and that's the thing that makes it so hard with Deep Space Nine, because once this show really hit its stride, once it really figured out what it is, I think honestly, like all the Star Trek shows, well, I'm going to say all of the Star Trek shows, like many of the Star Trek shows. You
want to say like all the vintage or
Star Trek shows,
or
right.
Silver Age, Golden Age.
Right. It's like there were certainly like great episodes in season 1 and season 2 of Deep Space Nine. By season 3, Sisko had his goatee. And, they were doing amazing, cool episodes in season 3. The Defiant showed up. Season 4, we finally got Worf. Season 5, you could feel the confidence building, which is really why I started to gravitate towards season 5. Season 5 gave us things like Trials and Tribulations. There are just Homefront, Paradise Lost. There's so many like great episodes in that season. But the thing about season 6 is that it accomplishes 2 things. Number one, it takes the idea of serialization or sort of continuous storytelling to an extent that had never really been done in Star Trek before. Like not even on Deep Space Nine, even though the Dominion War arc and all of the Cardassian Bajor conflict arc and all those things had been going on up to that point. It really kind of took it to a new level that was different. The season opens with a 6-parter that's just fantastic. You look back at it and you really appreciate the audacity of it. In a way, I like to think of it as a 7-parter with the season finale of season 5 called Arms, which kind of led into it in a brilliant way. With just a little message from Sisko to Gul Dukat, just his baseball sitting on the desk as if to say, I'll be back.
So great.
So great. And in those first 6 episodes alone, there were just so many amazing individual episodes, individual moments. Rocks and Shoals is simply staggering in terms of how good a story that is. These two groups of adversaries locked on this planet, and there is truly only one way out, and it's death. And it puts our Star Trek heroes into a situation that Star Trek rarely puts our heroes, which is there isn't a way out where you can just be clever and smart.
That's in my top 10, if not my top 15 Star Trek episodes of all time. I think Rocks and Shoals is incredible.
It's so emotional. And that last fight when the Jem'Hadar, show up for that last battle, it tears the heart out of you. And I think what was brilliant about that episode is that it didn't have to rescue our Starfleet heroes from their choices or from their decisions. It's that the Jem'Hadar are the Jem'Hadar, and they will do as they will. And the fight is the fight. And our heroes recognize that, and they understand it, and they feel something about it. They're not simply going through the motions of the action, which I think is something that defined Deep Space Nine throughout. Whenever it did any of these stories, it always came back to a line that Sisko had. Now I'm just forgetting the episode where it was, but he said, it's easy to be a saint in paradise.
In paradise, yeah. I think that's Homefront.
Yeah, you know what? I think you're right. Yeah. And it kind of brilliantly encapsulated what that show was all about, and what was realized in such a lovely way. And those first 6 episodes had great, huge space battle action scenes, like on a scale we had never before seen in Star Trek. Sacrifice of Angels.
They were outmanned.
Thousands of Dominion ships will come pouring through that wormhole.
Outgunned.
We're gonna fight our way out of this!
And running out of time.
To the conquerors of the Federation.
Now, Starfleet's last chance at victory.
Take us into the wormhole.
Only gonna meet a couple of thousand Dominion ships.
Is pure suicide.
Here they come.
On the next Star Trek Deep Space Nine.
Right when that fleet of Starfleet ships, that armada hits Deep Space Nine, up against the Dominion, the Cardassians, and when the Klingons come flying out of the sun, spoiler alert, literally flying out of the sun, it's just awesome. And the insane thing about season 6 is that, as great as all of that stuff is, and look, there are other amazing episodes in the season before I get to the capper, right? And just little things to sort of mention as stories. I have a soft spot for Statistical Probabilities, which is an episode
it's about you.
Yeah, it's about me, basically. It's about nerds coming to the station to kind of figure out how to fight the war. And the thing that I'm quite fond of is that apparently the character of Jack, who's one of the genetically engineered super people that Bashir is essentially babysitting because he is a genetically engineered Superman, which we learned in the previous season in Dr. Bashir, I presume, is that Jack, his personality was based on Robert Hewitt Wolf, my first boss, that apparently Jack's propensity for kind of perching and trying to sit above people and just all of that stuff just was an homage to Robert, who had left the show at that point. There are great smaller episodes that you wouldn't expect to work, but for me worked incredibly, like Honor Among Thieves, which is basically Donnie Brasco with Chief O'Brien, because Colin Meaney is a fantastic actor. He was such a great find. Putting him on the show was such an amazingly good decision. I also have to give that show a call out, because it was written by, or at least the story was written by one of my friends from way back, who came as Philip Kim, who came out. He was an assistant. He was Ira's assistant forever. I remember coming to visit him, and he took me to the sets and to kind of meet Ira. And I was just a Goober fan at the time, and so the fact that he was this guy to me was a huge deal, and that was his big credit.
And that episode is so off concept, and that's what was so great about Deep Space Nine. Like the original, any genre it could do, I mean, this was crazy. This was like, you said Donnie Brasco, but I'd look at any noir movie where, it's like T-Men, going undercover, and it's so bizarre. It's such a bizarre episode in a great way.
Work, yet it does. Mm-hmm. And then, a couple of weeks later after that, you've got something like His Way, which is, I think, the first appearance of Vic Fontaine. And it's delightful. And it's the kind of thing that it should not work.
Yeah.
And yet, because it's so deeply ingrained in the characters, because there's so much passion for the kind of story that's being told, it works just incredibly well. Now, okay, here's where you get to the kicker to me. Okay, there's all this great stuff. Deep Space Nine is kind of demonstrating that it can accomplish almost anything with its storytelling in season 6. It has fully absorbed all the lessons of the previous seasons. And you would think that, the first 6 episodes would themselves be enough of a mic drop, right? To say like, okay, fine, right? We're done. It's an end of discussion. It's the best season of Deep Space Nine, although obviously I've struggled with this. But then you have, on top of that, you have 2 other episodes. You have In the Pale Moonlight.
At 0800 hours, station time, the Romulan Empire formally declared war against the Dominion. They have already struck 15 bases along the Cardassian border. So, this is a huge victory for the good guys. This may even be the turning point of the entire war. There is even a welcome to the fight party tonight in the wardroom. So, I lied. I cheated. I bribed men to cover the crimes of other men. I am an accessory to murder. But the most damning thing of all, I think I can live with it. And if I had to do it all over again, I would. Garrick was right about one thing. A guilty conscience is a small price to pay for the safety of the Alpha Quadrant. So I will learn to live with it.
Which takes all of that moral complexity, that we were talking about with Rocks and Shoals, and turns it up to 11. It has one of the great Captain's Log endings of any Star Trek episode ever of all time, any show. I can live with it. I can live with it.
It's a fake. It's a fake.
Oh, it's
what a meme.
Oh yeah. It's brilliant. You can't stop watching it, and you cannot believe that it ends the way that it ends. No. And yet it does, and it commits to it. And again, the genius of it is that you never feel like it is how to put this correctly, like it's somehow a betrayal of the rules. That it's
not.
Yeah, it's not ignoring what makes Star Trek. In fact, what makes the drama work is the fact that it fully embraces what Star Trek is. Right? It understands the rule that it's violating, and it has feelings about it as a story. Like it's saying, "Hi, we're writing this and acting in it, and we're grappling with it, and we would love it if you would grapple with it with us." Because it's difficult.
What I love, it was in the day where Star Trek could really surprise you, and it was like I didn't know Star Trek could tell such an adult, smart story. It was back when you're like, my God, was that a great episode of Star Trek? That's when you would actually be shocked, not at how bad a Star Trek was, but how great it was. I mean, that's, top 5.
That it could just,
it gives City a run for its money. I mean, it's amazing.
Yeah. I'm sorry. Go ahead, Darren.
No.
I just like to play devil's advocate just for a little bit. I fully understand your love for season 5 and 6. But how do you defend the statement that it took them a really long time to get to this place?
How do you define unwarranted?
Yeah. No, how can you defend that it kind of didn't really work out very well in those first few seasons?
Well, I look at it this way. I mean, number one, that first season was, I think, very much a shakedown cruise, and yet it had great episodes. It had
Progress, Duet,
In
the Hands of the Prophets.
Yeah, and it's like, and remember that was a shorter season.
Mm-hmm. Too short a season.
Yeah,
too short a season.
Very good.
Then, which I believe was like the title of your Cinefantastic, review of season 2.
Okay, maybe it was, but this isn't about me. This is about
anyway. But season 3. I'm sorry, but season 2 had that opening, Bajor arc. Like there were always like really great stories on that show. But what had to gel first, right, was its identity. And I think what happened in those first couple of seasons was that they were trying to write the next generation on a space station, and discovering that you can't write the next generation on a space station.
Right.
But what you can do is write a Star Trek show that takes place on a space station and tell different kinds of stories.
Understand. I agree with you. I just wanted
to provoke answer.
Yeah, it's kind of like K7 in a way. You look at it, it's like if you did a whole show set on K7 with Nils Barris and Whit Bissell, like, maybe that
and these two gentlemen live together without driving each other crazy.
I gotta say, even episodes which aren't my favorites that season, they're really interesting. It's like in Sons and Daughters, Alexander comes back and he's a total fuck up, right? And that's exactly what he should be when you have an absentee father for, for how many years that Worf basically turned him over to his 90-year-old parents, Theodore Bickel and Georgia Brown. Right. And it's like, oh, you raise him. Of course he's a screw up. And it's like, it deals with that. And then, it's really such an interesting exploration of, Klingon culture. I mean, obviously all the Dominion stuff culminating in Sacrifice of Angels is brilliant. I mean, You Are Cordially Invited is really fun. The wedding episode, Terry Farrell looks amazing in that dress as a total aside. Even Who Mourns for Morn is kind of fun.
His top customer just hit bottom.
Can't believe he's really gone.
Now, Quark's about to hit the jackpot.
He left everything to you.
Me?
But everyone wants a piece of the action.
It's all ours.
Don't try anything.
And his fortune is about to change.
Turn around.
For the worse on the next Star Trek Deep Space Nine.
It has the stupid Ferengi comedies, and I use the term loosely, that for whatever reason, and I love Ira, and I think the reason the show is so good is because Ira truly gave no Fs. But his Quark, these shows like Magnificent Ferengi, and every season he wanted to do the Ferengi show. I mean, they were much better but then they do something just like totally out there, like One Little Ship, which is a ridiculous price, Fantastic Voyage, and it's great. And it's great.
And then there are small, brilliant things that happen in these episodes. And I think it was actually if I'm remembering correctly, if it was in A Time to Stand, it was in the season premiere, as we're finding, our crew has been divided. Some are on Deep Space Nine. Some are off with Starfleet fighting the war. And Kira obviously is on Deep Space Nine. And that Bajoran monk, shouting, evil must be opposed, and killing herself is just an astonishing moment you don't expect to see. But as much as we can say great things about this season and all of these episodes, and kind of laud the storytelling quality of what was happening here, and just kind of how it really expressed what this show was at its best. On top of all that, the cherry on top is Far Beyond the Stars.
Yeah, right.
Mm-hmm. To hell with you, and to hell with Stone!
Try to stay calm, Benny.
No, I'm tired of being calm. Calm never got me a damn thing.
I'm warning you, Benny, if you don't stop this, I'm going to call the police.
You go ahead, call them! Call anybody you want. They can't do anything to me. Not anymore. And nor can any of you. human being. Damn it. You can deny me all you want, but you cannot deny Ben Sisko exists. That future, that space station, all those people, they exist in here. In my mind, I created it. And every one of you know it. You read it. It's here. You hear what I'm telling you? You can pulp a story, but you cannot destroy an idea. Don't you understand? That's ancient knowledge. You cannot destroy an idea. That future, I created it, and it's real. Don't you understand? It is real. I created it, and it's real. It's real. Oh, God.
Which is heartbreaking and brilliant and, feels so personal in Avery's performance. And it's about so many things. It's about racism. It's about having dreams. It is about wanting. My God, it's even about being a writer. One of the things you don't realize until you become a professional television writer is if you go back and you watch that episode and you look at his walls, or you look at Benny's walls, and he has story written all over them, which seems insane, except when you're a television writer, that's what you do.
What do you think about that, Mike? Are you a huge fan? I mean, this is an episode that a lot of people, point to as maybe being Deep Space Nine's finest moment. Where are you on the, when it comes to the episode?
I haven't seen it in, probably 20 years. I remember being amazing and moving, and it blew me away. But, not that he necessarily listens to your podcast. I'm gonna choose the Tribble episode as my favorite Deep Space Nine episode. Just to piss off Ira.
which is season 5, which is one of the reasons why I really wanted to pick it. Because I'll never forget,
Ira has a standing,
I couldn't see watching that episode.
Ira has a standing invitation to come on the podcast to do live commentary of Pretty Maids All in a Row, which he said he would take us up on once we're back in the studio. So that would be.
I will say there's something to be said for being the Star Trek series that at the moment is the bastard stepchild. I suppose Deep Space Nine was the first, it was the first new show to come along when there was already a series on the air. And, when the executives take their eye off your show, that's when you can do great shit like this.
Yeah.
It was the same with Enterprise. They were like, we're just rounding out the syndication package. Yeah. They're probably canceled. Just let them do what they want. And that's when you as, creators get to do your best work.
But neglect is powerful.
I just want to mention something about Far Beyond the Stars. And though it is a great episode and I love it, I have the same problem with that as I do with The Inner Light, is that it's a great episode that is not about the characters in the show.
Mm-hmm.
And I think that falls in the negative column for me.
Wow. Okay.
It's a strange position to take, but
it's not a strange position to take. I disagree with you. I totally understand the point because I agree with you when it comes to The Inner Light. Far Beyond the Stars. I'm going to go off on a rant here for a second. One of the things I keep seeing, which really makes me nuts, is people who are criticizing the new Star Trek shows. And there's a lot you can criticize them for, start to go off on how woke they are. That's not the problem. Look at this episode, Far Beyond the Stars. What is more quote unquote woke than this? It's brilliant. It has a story to tell about racism, about it's because it's smart. It deals with diversity and racism and all these things in such a complex and compelling way. Whatever people's problems are. It's like you read these things and people have very good points they make, and they say, "Oh man, but the new shows they're so woke." It's like, what does that even mean? It's so stupid.
Yeah,
and that gets me crazy because then it tars anyone who doesn't like those shows with this idea that you're like this crazy. It's like that's not the problem,
right? It's like the drama has to work first and foremost. And I'm with you, Mark. I mean, I agree with you about Darren and Mark about Inner Light. I think what separates this is that, and I'm just going to come out and say it. I think that Avery Brooks is better in this episode than Patrick Stewart is in The Inner Light. I
agree. I fully agree.
Yeah, I third the motion. And if Mike could remember this episode, he would agree too.
Damn right he would. Damn right he ordered the code red.
Indeed.
And he'd do it again. No, it's just, look, I could make, obviously I have no passion for the subject. I could probably make an impassioned case for almost any season of the show. But to me, the more I thought about it, the more I realized that it became inarguable when I started adding all of these things together. And I'll also say this. We talked about just the sort of the diversity of storytelling and the great episodes, right? I mean, look, so many great episodes, but just even like these tippy tops, right? Like in The Pale Moonlight, Far Beyond the Stars, like they're completely different kinds of stories. They're completely different kinds of stories from Rocks and Shoals. I will tell you what's common about all of them. And I'm going to say what I said before about, Avery Brooks. When Avery finally emerged as the captain of this show, man, like there is just, obviously, Kirk is Kirk, but like
you use captain as just a name, but it means that he's the leader of the show,
right? Yeah. Exactly.
The number one on the call sheet is number one in the show.
That's right.
And
that didn't happen till later.
Absolutely. Right. And I got to say one last thing about this whole Far Beyond the Stars nonsense. This whole idea, IDIC is built into the DNA of Star Trek. What does that mean? Infinite diversity in infinite combinations. Diversity is in the mission statement of Star Trek. So when you dismiss diversity as being an important part of Star Trek, you're not understanding the very heart and soul of Star Trek. Now, I have to say, it also is called IDIC if you listen to the audiobook of 50-Year Mission, because apparently they couldn't call me to find out how you pronounce IDIC. Oh, no, IDIC. IDIC was very important to us. You mean IDIC? So, but it's true. I mean, I think Darren was the first person to say, Mark, I really like your book, but boy, this audiobook is just like, they mispronounce every other word. It's like,
that was only because you didn't call me to help, but that's okay.
It had nothing to do with it. Let me explain something. This is not amateur hour. There's a huge publisher. You turn it in. I don't hear from them. At least at that point, I don't hear from them until like they need us to do PR. I had nothing to do with that audiobook.
I'm teasing you, right?
And now they come to me and they say, "Oh, will you read the introduction or will you do this or that?" But back then, they didn't call us. In fact, I had somebody who I knew very well who was doing the audio, and he wanted to call me to find out. And they said, "You can't call the author. You're not allowed. It's verboten. It's like patents of force. You can't do it." So anyway.
I'm pulling your leg, right?
Are you? I don't know.
Of course.
Okay. Of course I would have called you. I would have preferred you had done it. I would have preferred it. You could have done all the parts.
I would have.
Okay. So look, you've made a really compelling argument, I think, on behalf of A Deep Space Nine Season 6. I have to give you credit for making this, as much as I love Season 5, I think Season 6 is the stronger season. Do I have to do Next Generation Season 3?
Yes. A little bit.
Dude.
I'm doing it really quick. Let me do it really quick. Let me be the FedEx guy. Remember the
Yes, John Machida.
John Machida. I'm going to be look. Star Trek Season 3 is the season. Obviously, Michael Piller comes in after Michael Wagner had his nervous breakdown, and the great thing about Piller is he was a fan of the show already. He wasn't a Star Trek fan, but he was a fan of Next Gen. And so he really understood that this was a show that needed to be about the characters. And that's why, right off the bat, I mean, yeah, the season premiere is not very good. But it does mention baseball a lot. But then you have Melinda Snodgrass's Ensigns of Command with the Shellyak Corporate, which is a really interesting episode. I remember watching it thinking, oh, this season is already looks like it's going to be a better season. Then, of course,
Shellyak was nowhere to be seen, and I was very disappointed.
I mean, I talk about, I'll talk about Survivors till the cows come home. I love the freaking Survivors.
Next time on Star Trek, The Next Generation, the crew discovers the sole survivors of an alien massacre.
The attacking force spared you for some reason.
They're guarding a dark secret.
Stop!
A mystery that's destroying Troy's brain. A threat that's attacking the Enterprise.
Commence rapid fire with all weapons on full.
On Star Trek, The Next Generation.
It's like a great Twilight Zone episode, great alien race. It's shot on location, part of it. I mean, it just, everything about that works. Amazing guest stars and John Anderson, as I guess the villain. I can't really call him the villain. The antagonist.
I made my writing staff watch that episode. I watched it with them because basically it was, okay, here is a lesson, on how to lead the audience along. And then when they least expect it, kick them in the balls. Because that's just the sort of story that it is. It's fantastic.
I still hear that song that Troy is hearing, that music box. Creeps me out, man. Okay, who watches the Watchers?
He can't bring back the dead. Show them, Picard. You can bring back my wife to me.
I cannot.
Why? Why won't you do this for me? Have I failed you in some way? Are you angry with me?
I'm not angry with you.
Well, then I beg you, bring her back to me. I will give you my life in exchange. Please, take back what you gave me. Give it to her. Let her live.
It is beyond my power.
Nothing is beyond your power. You are the overseer. I will prove it.
Let go!
If you believe I'm all powerful, then you cannot hurt me. If, however, I am telling the truth, and I am mortal, you will kill me. But if the only proof you will believe is my death, then shoot.
Lingo, don't do it! Father, no!
Another top 20 Star Trek episode. What a great episode. The idea of them believing Picard is God. And it's funny because, look, I don't in any way want to dismiss TOS because obviously it's my favorite Star Trek. But, you compare that to something like the Paradise Syndrome. Let's face it, Who Watches the Watchers is a much better show. Darren's rolling his eyes. I think it's great. Ray Wise is in it. It's just so interesting. What happens when you break the prime directive and you have to repair the damage? Really interesting concept. Then you have the debut of Ron Moore with the bonding. Again, an interesting premise. If you're going to have a ship full of families, what happens when one of the parents dies on an away team mission? Really interesting.
Shoot the kid into space.
Would have
been a good idea.
We're waiting for the Romulans to come back and do something interesting after they told us after they announced in Neutral Zone at the end of the first season, they're back. But they weren't, apparently they weren't convinced. But then they come back in The Enemy.
Next time on Star Trek, The Next Generation, Geordi is missing in action on a deadly planet.
Mr. Worf, launch the probe.
A violent storm blocks the crew's desperate search to find him.
Will he survive?
I can't see!
And his fate lies with the enemy.
You are my prisoner!
On Star Trek, The Next Generation.
Basically enemy mine. But what makes that episode, it's not about the two of them having to get along, Geordi and the Romulan. It's about this really great ethical question when Worf refuses to give blood to the dying Romulan. And is Picard gonna, order him to, and I mean, the fact that they let the Romulan die, it made a statement for Next Generation that this is not this anodyne kind of show, they're willing to go there to interesting places. And they really wrestled with this. This was a big decision at the time. Would they assassinate Worf's character? But they didn't. By doing that, they made him so compelling. And it said, this Star Trek, okay, it's not going to just be this Pollyanna universe. Like, we're going to deal with more interesting things. And it's the same in The Defector.
Please, you must help me.
An archenemy defects to the Enterprise.
You're a traitor.
I came to stop a war.
But can he save them from a death trap?
You're a spy, aren't you?
Or will he lure them into a full-scale massacre?
Shall we die together?
Find out on Star Trek: The Next Generation.
The whole thing, you're questioning James Sloyan. Is he a good guy? Is he a bad guy? Is he really defecting? What's really going on? Great episode. And it's mostly told as a bottle show. There's not, a whole lot off the ship, but it's a pressure cooker, and it's a really great cat and mouse story. And again, another great guest star performance. You have a couple other episodes that are sort of hit or miss. You got the return of Q and Deja Q, which is, it's almost always delightful to see Q back. And certainly, in this episode where he's wrestling with having lost his powers, and then it ends. Isn't this the episode that ends with the mariachi band celebrating at the end of the episode? I mean,
another great meme.
But it's so much fun. It's so much fun. And then look, Matter Perspective is Rashomon on the holodeck. They were trying for so long to get a murder mystery right. It really isn't until Deep Space Nine did Necessary Evil that they really get the noir thing right.
Which I think was in season 6.
I think it was sooner than that. But we're not doing Deep Space Nine.
We're not doing Deep Space Nine.
And then yesterday's Enterprise, which is their Mirror Mirror.
An Enterprise from the past rips through time and alters the future.
I'm supposed to be dead.
Now Lieutenant Yar lives again to help the crew fight a devastating battle.
This war's not supposed to be happening. You've got to send those people back to correct this.
And one courageous team must die to save the Federation from destruction on Star Trek: The Next Generation.
Is there a better episode than The Next Generation? I don't know if there is.
Yeah. I mean, I remember when that episode came out, I was like you. I watched the first few episodes of season 3, and I thought it was really, really, the show had just come a really long way.
It was a different show.
Totally. And I thought, okay, wow, you know what? I'm beginning to have faith. But I remember I missed yesterday's Enterprise. I had some stupid meeting or something on campus. And all my friends were coming up to me, because I'm a nerd, and saying, you have to see this, no matter what you have to do. Just watch it. You won't believe it. And I remember watching that and thinking, oh, this is what this show is. I mean, it was eye-opening. It was truly the game changer.
Well, it's interesting because the conventional wisdom was the best of both worlds changed everything. No, that was the cherry on top. I mean, yesterday's Enterprise was kind of when when it was like, oh, this show is really a fitting successor to the original series. It was the first time we was like, this is on par with some of the better episodes of TOS. And you hadn't really seen that until yesterday's Enterprise. And then Sins of the Father, which is the beginning of them doing really great stuff with Worf. Captain's Holiday, for as big a mess as that is. And of course, this was the season from hell. We could do a whole episode about season 3. I mean, they were so behind the 8 ball on scripts. And I mean, I think Captain's Holiday, was the episode that almost broke Ira Bear. It was the reason he didn't come back for a season. But it's just a hoot, at least for the first half. Then it has that stupid sci-fi MacGuffin at the end. But I mean, it's one of the first times I actually laughed at the show in a good way. Like we laugh with it, and it's really good. And then, Hollow Pursuits shows dealing with something very interesting, which is more applicable now than ever. The whole idea that Barclay, prefers virtual reality to reality. Isn't that what all these kids today with their phones, look at their phones all the time and Instagram are doing right
with
now?
Their Pac-Man and their Dan Fogelberg.
Well, they're Dan Fogelberg? What? And Hollow Pursuits was really kind of ahead of its time in sort of dealing with the addictive quality of virtual reality. Sort of milquetoast guy who doesn't want to get out of his parents' basement. And how funny is all that stuff? What was it? The Troy was the goddess of empathy.
Yeah.
I mean, really, I mean, I haven't watched it in probably 15 years, but it's so funny.
It's funny. I would not, if you had asked me to pick my favorite season in Next Gen, I don't know that it would have been 3, but, just hearing you talk about all the episodes now, and I realized this was, I think, the season of Star Trek that made me sort of like seriously look into like, hey, it would be great to write for this franchise. Mm-hmm. I wrote, fan letters to the writers. It was the first time I'd ever done that in my life. As I was just a kid. I wrote to Richard Danis, who I thought, he was the credited writer on Deja Q, which I thought was really funny and really good. He wrote me back and was very encouraging. I called Paramount, from where I was living on the East Coast and asked for Melinda Snodgrass, and they put me through to her.
323-956-5000.
Exactly. And I talked to her for probably 3 minutes because I was so nervous, and she was very encouraging. It was a great season of TV made by some, really talented people under the, stewardship of, as you pointed out, Michael Piller, who I was lucky enough to meet with and work with very briefly as an intern on Voyager.
I want to do it. I want to do an episode on Michael. We haven't done it. We did an Insurrection episode. We did a Great Birds episode, but we haven't done an episode that's just devoted to Michael. And I really want to do that at some point. He deserves it. He warrants it. And, his whole philosophy about lifting up and mentorship, he's the reason there are all these great showrunners out there right now.
Yeah.
It's when you look at Ron Moore and, Noreen and a lot of these guys, it's because of Michael. He gave them these opportunities. Sarek was another great episode. I mean, I remember how just to hear, you talk about all the fan service now and all these franchises, how annoying it is. Sarek, just to hear the word Spock mentioned, how that was like it sent you back. It was like, oh my God, he's doing the mind meld. He's mentioning all these things. He goes, Spock.
That is a worship word.
And you're like,
not speaking.
Oh my God, he said Spock. It was like, you had chills. He's like, he mentioned Spock. It's like, because the show was so allergic to mentioning anything that had to do with the original. And they were all very clear that they weren't fans of the original. They thought it was goofy, right? And so to hear him say Spock was wild. And the whole idea of doing it as an allegory for Alzheimer's was very interesting. Mm-hmm. Menage a Trois, the less said about that, the better. But then, of course, it all culminates in Best of Both Worlds, which is this, superb cliffhanger. Not since Who Shot JR was there a cliffhanger, at least in our world, that was more talked about. I think, we didn't see it coming. Yeah. I don't think TV Guide said it was a two-parter. So
no, they didn't. And it's difficult to overstate, or it really even, I think, to convey to viewers who were not alive or not quite sapient at the time, how much during the third season, Next Generation had begun to penetrate the pop culture, and then B, how that episode in particular just kind of turned sort of our current sort of obsession with why we even have, a Star Trek Picard, or any of those things, how important that episode was. Because you're right, people were talking about that episode the same way they were talking about Who Shot JR, right? You couldn't believe it. I remember watching it and just falling into my TV screen. Mr. Worf, fire, right? Like, holy crap.
Yeah. You remember that, Michael, seeing that for the first time?
I do indeed. I think was that Star Trek's first two-parter since the Menagerie?
Yep.
It was, we were, and it was its very first season ending cliffhanger, which was also just stunning. Nobody was expecting it. And I had just been like, as much as I enjoyed this season, I had been blown away by, the Borg's introduction in season 2. Mm-hmm. And was just, I was like, oh my God, they finally have, they were trying with the conspiracy little insect guys, and the Ferengi clearly didn't work out. Oh my God, I think they may have just backed into the coolest Star Trek villain ever. And I'm like, oh, they're going to pick this up in season 3. And I'm just waiting and waiting and waiting. But I remember the feeling seeing the preview for Best of Both Worlds. Finally. And that ends with Riker saying, they're going to Earth. And it was just like, whoa, I could not wait for this episode. And it still has an impact. I think when they redid it for the Blu-ray. They had I think a couple of screenings around the country, and I went to one here in LA, and it held up on the big screen. It was really quite an experience.
But as longtime listeners of the show will know, I'm not a fan of the 2-hour version because they cut out the to be continued dun dun dun. Dun, 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 dun. That great, that great thing because it says Mr. Work Fire and they cut to, and it doesn't have the dun, 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 leading up to be continued. So I prefer it with the cliffhanger because that's awesome. But it's funny because people forget, everybody says, oh, Best of Both Worlds, big cliffhanger. But when Neutral Zone aired, what a huge cliffhanger that felt like. Because at the time, we didn't know that season 2 was not going to start with the Romulans. We thought, the Romulans are going to be coming for war, and this is going to be great, and it's going to be so cool next season. We didn't know instead it would be like this lukewarm remake of this, phase 2 script, The Child, and then we wouldn't see the Romulans again. Or, and then it was the same thing when you see the Borg and Q-Who. It's like, oh, I can't wait to see these guys come back. And then you almost forgot about them because it was so many episodes. And then finally they come back in Best of Both Worlds. It's like, okay, well, they're going to have to finish this story. You can't, not come back and find out, Picard's a Borg now. They're going to have to do something here. And what a great way to end, a great season.
Definitely.
Well, and if only our heroes on the Enterprise D had known that the way to defeat the Borg and turn them good again was to play Michael Jackson music for them.
What?
That's a Captain EO reference.
Oh, I see. That was a little too esoteric. I thought if you were going to
There's nothing too esoteric on the
I was going to say, no, I'm not going to say it because if the answer is to put them to sleep, I got a few shows I can suggest they watch. But anyway, this is great. I mean, this is really, these are all great seasons. They all are winners.
I think that people expecting us to pick one season from all of these Star Trek shows as the best of all of them, I think is just wrong.
Yeah. So maybe we should change the title to The Best of All Worlds.
Yeah. Ooh, that's good.
Yeah.
And we have the best season of every Star Trek series except for Voyager. So it's really unfair not to include Voyager. So I'm going to turn it over to Mike. Mike, if we were going to add Voyager, what would the best season be? 4?
I think it might have been 4. I think that was the year. Wasn't that the year Brandon took over?
Yeah, that wasn't that Year of Hell that year. I'm trying to remember.
That was Year of Hell. I mean, it was definitely Seven's introduction, and there were a lot of Dynamite 7 episodes when she joined the cast.
Yeah.
The ultimate weapon.
We have all eternity to accomplish our mission.
Does not destroy.
Captain, there's a spatial distortion heading toward us.
It erases.
All organisms and man-made objects have been eradicated.
Now, Voyager gets caught in the crossfire.
All hands brace for impact.
Can a device that alters time ever be destroyed?
It's trying to erase us from history.
On the next Star Trek Voyager.
I think it's probably 4. I think 4 and 5. I went back and looked at the list. I think probably my favorite Voyagers are in 4 and 5 when Brandon was just like finally, after writing a lot of Star Trek under the guidance from Jerry and Michael, was just finally put in charge of the whole thing. And
because 4 not only had Year of Hell, it had Message in a Bottle, which is a really good episode. It had Living Witness, which is a terrific episode.
Imagine turning the Starship Voyager
Target the first city and fire
into the warship Voyager.
When diplomacy failed, there's only one alternative: violence.
Now the imagining is over. The crew will turn into cold-blooded killers.
Resistance is futile.
And history will turn into anarchy.
No, this isn't possible.
On the next Star Trek Voyager.
So it had the Omega Directive, which is interesting. So they were doing some really interesting work, and Michael had left to go do Legend at this point. Was it Legend or he just left? I'm trying to remember. I know he left, but
I'm not sure.
But I think he was gone at this point, but he was consulting because was this Brannon or Jerry still?
Well, he had left. No. Because
he had left early. He left after 2.
Yeah,
right?
He left in season 2 because he was gone. Because I came back and did some freelancer episodes, and he and Jerry was already running the show by then, and they kind of split the duties even when I was there in season 2. Because he had left, I think, tail end of season 1, and then came back because Legend got canned.
Mm-hmm.
And so he was back in the writers' room.
Oh, that's right.
And left again. I don't know what he left. What he left.
Well, he felt he'd left it all in the field, and that it was time to leave. He knew when it was time to retire, unlike Tom Brady and some other people.
Right.
And he decided and then he went and did the Dead Zone, and he did other stuff. But he'd done it. He'd been there for a long time, and he did. To his credit, he didn't feel he had anything left to give. And he had really, by having the open script writing program and nurturing young talent, he had given so much back to the medium of television, so much to Star Trek. His job was done.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. But I think season 4 of Voyager is the right season. I think that's a fairly strong season for that show.
They also did a Dynamite episode called Living Witness, where the doctor's program wakes up and it's like hundreds of years in the future. And
I think that's one of the best episodes of Voyager.
Yeah.
That's one of my favorites.
In general,
it's a strong episode. I think it was when we did our top 100 or top 51 or whatever we did. It was one of the few Voyager episodes that was on that list.
Yeah, and Brannon and Brian Fuller and I think Joe Manosky wrote that one. It was dynamite. I mean, and again, like when there had never been a Star Trek episode that literally had none of the original cast members in.
Yeah,
it was brilliant. It was brilliant, and that was in season 4.
Yeah, no, see, I think let's go with Voyager season 4. And of course, we want to hear what you out there in listener land have to say. Did we hit the mark? Did we miss the mark? What are your favorite seasons of Star Trek? We didn't talk about the animated series, but I think that goes without saying that season 1 was much stronger than season 2, which was sort of the leftovers.
Agreed. Done.
Yeah.
Solved.
Okay. Done. Done. And we'll leave any other future Star Treks to other scholars and professors of Trekology to explore. Okay. Well, guys, this was a delight as always. And I want to thank Michael for joining us once again. Of course, Ashley Miller, my co-host Darren Docterman, and we want to thank Peter Holmstrom, our producer and archivist, as well as Natalie Miscali, Zach Raggett, and everyone at Electric, especially the very busy Mark Rivera, who is not only now mixing Best Movies Never Made, but also Inglorious Treksperts 430 movie, and he's and Treksperts Briefing Room. So he has his hands
a busy
full.
man.
He's a busy man, indeed he is. And so thank you, Mark. You've been doing a great job. And thank you to everybody for joining us. And of course, you can continue to share your thoughts. Things have been busy on the social over at Twitter, Inglorious Trek on Instagram, Inglorious Treksperts, also Treksperts BR, Treksperts Briefing Room on Twitter and Instagram, respectively. And you can always come over to the Facebook, where there is also Inglorious Treksperts for sale, which means free. So come and share, come and share your thoughts and grow stronger through the sharing. And of course, we hope to see all of you at some upcoming events we'll be announcing very soon, where you can find us as long as you don't hit me with a scooter. And so that's it. That's all I got to say. So
may your seasons be as pleasant.
Keep on trekking, ingloriously, of course.
This show was produced by Dean Devlin and Mark A. Altman and is an Electric Surge Network production.